Jefferson County is historically where a lot of the more expensive homes are. So that's why you see these numbers. It wasn't actually always like that, as you can see. Basically, 2019 was like the big breakout. So 2019 is when Jefferson County broke out, and significantly above the average. Jefferson looks like they were down, and then they're up, to 675 for their median. I don't think that it's really indicative of what's really going on in the market by and large. We're going to just X that out, and we can revisit it here a little later on in the video. But because Helena is the primary focus, it's where the most people live, so it's the best indicator of kind of like what's happening. Most people in comparison to Jefferson County, and most of the people in Jefferson County, do everything in Helena, so the infrastructure and stuff plays a role. What happened from December to January is good, even though a lot of people will look at that as not good. So that's about a 10% decline in median sales price, so from 465 to 434. And then we're going to look at percent of list price, because this is going to tell us how many of those properties were listed correctly and how many were really, well, it'll give us an idea of how many were negotiated down. So do we still have unreasonable sellers that think that it's 2022? And this will tell us whether yes, we still are dealing with sellers that think that it's 2022. That means that the properties are selling for 97.7% of their sales price. So if you have a property, just round numbers, that was listed at $100,000, that means that it's selling for $97,700. So 97.7%. In order for the market to show all the properties are just coming on the market, they're reasonably priced, there is no negotiation needed, you're going to be in this 99 to 98 range. So there's still room for a little negotiation, but basically anytime you go into 97 territory, even if it's high 97, it still indicates that properties by and large are coming on the market overpriced and they need price adjustment. What this doesn't show, it doesn't show the number of price reductions. That would be really nice if it showed that, but we have to do that manually, and it's just kind of a pain in the butt. I can tell you that there are tons of price reductions for buyers. This is probably one of the better times that I've seen in the last 3 years to actually purchase, because I think the sellers are starting to kind of wake up to the fact that the times have changed. We're in a different market cycle, and if they would like to not lose a ton of money, that now is probably a pretty good time to sell. So you do see more reasonable sellers that are coming on the market. So new listings has gone up. This is not unexpected either. I mean, it's the same thing that happens every year. 40 in December 2021, 53. 29 in December 2022, 67. 42 up to 66. 50 up to 68. 37 up to 91. This is probably one of the most significant ones that I've seen. This doesn't go all the way back to the great financial collapse, or the GFC, as it's tenderly referred to. So 2008 to 2012, because it actually was not uncommon to see stuff like this. This is a little interesting. So, it's basically triple. January, there was a pretty significant amount of new listings that hit the market. This is the total number of homes for sale. Again, it's actually, I have a hard time with this number because, I don't know exactly when they're talking about homes for sale. There's a lot of data that I think is missing out of this, but it does give a good indication too of generally what's happening on the market. So 192 properties that are currently on the market, up to 262 that are on the market. The sign of a nice, healthy market is somewhere right around in here. 388. So between like 350 and 400. So that's where we want to be. It levels the playing field as far as seller advantage or buyer advantage. As it sits right now, because the inventory is low, it does give the illusion that there is a seller advantage. But if you look at this, This indicates very drastically that the seller does not have the advantage, because the number of pending sales that we had in January is the lowest that it has ever been, actually. So I remember, so I got licensed in 2008, and I've looked at the data ever since then. I wish I would have saved the data. I thought it would always be available, but apparently not. I don't know why we don't have a 10-year, they have all of the data. So I don't know why they go 10 years back or 20 years back. So this is the lowest that I've ever seen it. This does really indicate, when I was saying that sellers will look at this, they can look at this data and be like, well, that's not too bad. This is really what they need to be looking at, is that pending sales fell off a cliff. This fell off a cliff. What's important about that is that it's showing that there are more buyers that are uninterested in purchasing real estate right now than sellers are under the impression of. Closed sales. What's interesting about this is a lot of times when you see pending sales, you'll see, I think I might make a word up here, but you see the discorrelation. So if pending sales are falling, a lot of times you'll see the closed sales for that month are up. Just because the market is naturally evening out the number of buyers, right? When you see this happen, these are pretty good indicators. We can go back here. We'll try to pick July. So July of 2025, closed sales, 99 for August. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so it's been doing that for a while. So that means our buyer inventory is depleting. So it's not replenishing itself. So that means that the number of new buyers that are actually coming into the market, it's once they purchase, they're not replaced with one or two more. They're just actually not being replaced at all. So which is also an indicator of what's going on. So you can draw a lot of data from looking at pending and closed sales. So because normally when you see closed sales and pending sales, a lot of times they're going to be inverse in a healthy market. Because you have people that have closed on that or that have pended on that property. And then once they close, there's another pending property from that seller. So that does indicate that people are probably leaving. Because if they're not replacing themselves in the numbers, what that means is that they are not taking part in the real estate market for whatever reason. So whether they're moving into assisted living or dying, fortunately, which is something we all do, or leaving the market completely. So days on market, days on market went down a little bit. So that means that things are selling a little faster. So out of the depleted pool of buyers we have, they're making quicker decisions. So I guess that's good for sellers and good for buyers too. It means that the ones that are buying have probably been looking for a little while. Months of supply is going up. Once we hit 6 months, then we have now officially entered into a buyer's market. What's interesting about this is that you can see this is about the only time from 2014 to 2015 that we were in a solid buyer's market. A lot of times people, will say that it's 3 months and you're in a buyer's market. I am a student of old school data aggregation, and a lot of this information is pretty erroneous in my opinion, that it's 3 months and you're in a buyer's market. Because if that was the case, then we've been in a buyer's market this entire time, which I know is not accurate, because I've been taking part in the market. Percent of list price, we already went over. Yeah, so generally speaking, the data is kind of what I expected that the data would be. Target interest rate for most buyers before they start getting really excited about purchasing a home, nationally anyway, was pulled at 4.5%. Yeah, so 30-year fixed is 6.1, 15-year is 5.5. So even at the 15-year, which is really expensive, because you're effectively doubling your principal payment. So most people can't even fathom going this route. Most everybody's at the 30-year fixed. We're still, we'll call it 1.5%. It's actually 1.6% off from where we need to be. In order for us to reduce down there, there are a lot of things that have to change economically, which it doesn't look like that's probably going to happen either. It's not a completely bleak picture. There are things in here, just even looking at percent of list price and then number of homes for sale. So that's going up, that's going down, that's going down, that's going down, while that's going generally, this is very interesting actually, but generally it should be going up if all those other things are happening. My professional opinion on it is, and being in the market, if I was going to give advice to anybody, it would be, if you're a seller, get really reasonable about your price. Know that you're competing for very few buyers. And so those very few buyers that are out in the market, you're going to have to give them a good deal. Because if you're not going to give them a good deal, they're going to go somewhere where they do get a good deal. There's an old saying, my dad taught me this one, and I pretty much live my life by this, is that you want to sell when you want to sell. You don't want to sell when you need to sell. So if you need to sell, you're always going to sell for less. You'll always sell for less, because when we get desperate, our decisions can't be trusted. We can't be trusted to make sound decisions, because now we're acting purely with emotion, as opposed to looking at the data. If people are thinking about putting their house on the market, you got to get really reasonable about your price, because the pool of buyers does not indicate that it's replenishing itself. So for every buyer that buys a house, it doesn't do a one-to-one replenishment. So once they buy a house, they're gone. So that buyer is now gone out of the market, not replenished by another one or another two. So a healthy market usually looks like, for every buyer that's purchasing, you get about 1.5 buyers back into the market. And right now it looks like we're getting 0. Anyway, I hope that's helpful. Call me if you have any questions on anything. Please call.